Hello friends, in this video we are going to see the super keyword and how we use that in Java. The super keyword, the S is not caps here, we are showing it caps, but in Java when we are using it, the S will be in lowercase. We will see that soon. In Java, this super keyword refers base or superclass. That means base or super is same in Java. So when we have two class A and class B is a subclass of class A. Then in class B we can refer the class A with a super keyword. The keyword can be used from immediate subclass only. That means if we have class A, B and C and the inheritance relation is A is the superclass for B, B is the superclass for C. Then from C, we cannot refer A with a super keyword. Only the immediate class can be accessed. That means from C, if we place a super keyword, that means we are representing class B. Similarly, in class B, if we place a super keyword, we are representing class A. Below is our existing class, which we created while learning the inheritance in this video series. What we are going to do in the C car, we are going to replace set methods into constructor. Then we will study the super keyword. So once we remove the set function, we do not have any constructor here and we don't have any set method also. So what happens, compiler will provide a default constructor. Even in the existing example also, the compiler will provide a default constructor. So without set function, we always rely on compiler provided constructor to initialize the internal members. Alright, we will see that soon in Eclipse. Our final class looks like this. So in C BMW car we removed the set function, and in C car also we removed the set function. And in main entry also we remove the set function. Let us explore this in Eclipse. So here is our Eclipse. So first we will go to C car and we will remove this set name speed function. We'll save it. Once we save it, we will be seeing error in C BMW. We will go there and we will remove set method here as well. We will save this. Then we will go to main entry, because in main entry, after creating the car, we are making call to a function which was deleted by us. So now we will delete this entry also. Now what happens? Our application relies on compiler provided default constructor, so which will initialize every member to its default. So let me step over. Because since there is no constructor, at present we made a call to our compiler provided constructor. So what happens internally, it will get inside the compiler provided constructor for C BMW. Then the compiler provided default constructor for C BMW makes call to its immediate base class car. The C car. Then the default constructor for C car get called. So CCAR will initialize its members to the default, then it returns call to the CBMW. Then CBMW will initialize its member and returns it to the caller main entry. So now we are at line 7. So by this time the car is initialized, and if you see, all the members are initialized to its default value. So now if we ask to print these details, I can watch out here in the console window. It prints a null for car name, maximum speed is 0, then part number 1 is 0, part number 2 is 0. Alright, now let us go back to our Eclipse. Alright, now we will add constructor for our base class. We can add constructor for both the classes, but first we will add it for the base class. So if you see, we just replaced the set function with the constructor for CCAR, and this constructor receives 2 parameters, then initializes its internal member. Since we have a explicit constructor here, that means we defined our own constructor. This explicit constructor hides the default constructor. So what happens when user wants to create a CCAR, they should specify a value for name and speed. The name and speed they will pass it as a parameter, then those parameters will come in here inside the constructor and initializes the internal members. But once we add this constructor, we get error popping out from our derived class, which means the subclass. The subclass here is CBMW. The error looks like this. The implicit super constructor, if you see, I am reading the error here in the problem statement. Implicit super constructor CCAR is undefined for default constructor. Must define an explicit constructor. What this means? This means even though we don't have any constructor previously in both the class, the compiler provided an implicit constructor. That means a constructor with no parameter in both the classes, and it initialized its internal member according to the default rule. So for long and integer it placed a 0, for object it placed a null. We already saw that. So it says that must define an explicit constructor. Where we have to define it? We have to define it in the CCAR class. Why? Because that's where the CBMW class, that's where the error is popped out. Okay, to better understand this, first we will implement the CCAR in Eclipse. The CCAR constructor in Eclipse. So here is our class file. This is where we left previously. What we will do, we will write a constructor for this. So here is the constructor. Now if I save, you can see an error comes from CBMW. So add constructor CBMW. So it's suggesting to add a constructor. So if you click here, the error will go away. And if you see, it used the keyword called super. That means the first thing what it does is it is making call to the super keyword, and it passed 2 parameter. Whatever it received here, it passed those 2 parameter. What we will do, we will modify this constructor to suit our need. But because here we need to initialize BMW part number 1 and BMW part number 2. So the fix actually provided parameter required for our base class. Why? Because it needs to initialize a name as well as a speed. Okay. Now what we will do, we will put other member as well. So int, I'm just keeping it as part 1. That means part number 1. Part number 1, then int part number 2. So if you see, this is the default rule. From derived class, if you place a super keyword, it refers to base class constructor. So I placed a cursor here, and you can see how it refers the CCAR. That means this is the constructor, and it expects 2 parameter. So we are passing whatever we received as part of CBMW to our CCAR. Then what we can do, we can initialize our internal members. Internal members are so that's all. We are done with it. So one point what we have to notice, the super keyword should always at the calling the constructor through super keyword, that should be the first statement when you are having your own constructor. So now we provided an explicit constructor in CBMW after seeing the error. So we have some error at main entry. We will resolve this later. Now we will go back to our slide. So now we will talk about the subclass constructor which we already created. So in the Eclipse demo, we saw how we added a constructor while rectifying the error. We also saw how we modified the constructor in the subclass to suit our need, because the constructor provided by the Eclipse does not have additional parameter for the subclass. So we added those parameters and initialized the subclass members. The constructor was shown aside. If you see in the constructor, actually we added 2 parameters, int part number 1, int part number 2. Then after calling the base class constructor at line 5, we called BMW part number 1 and BMW part number 2 and initialized our internal members. Eclipse placed the super keyword to call the base class constructor. That means at line 5 you can see the super keyword. So here the super represents its immediate base class. So CMW is the class at present we are in. Its immediate base class is CCAR. So super represents the constructor for CCAR. So in Eclipse we saw that through tooltip also. So it's shown super represents the constructor for the base class. We also used we can also use a source menu of Eclipse to define the constructor. Here we are already defined the constructor. We can explore this option also as part of the demo. What we can do, we will delete our constructor CBMW, then we will generate with this option. So when we are in Eclipse, we will do this again. So once the constructor is defined, we can use this in the driver class. Actually, in our main entry, we can actually use this constructor to initialize the members. So we no need to call the set method, and we can use this constructor. So what we have done here is, when we started this demo, we started it with the constructor provided default constructor. I mean the compiler provided default constructor in both the classes. So we can the error message referred this as implicit constructor. That means the compiler provided one. So we replaced those implicit constructor with our own version of explicit constructor in both CCAR as well as CBMW subclass. Okay, now we will explore this in Eclipse. What we will do, we will explore creating the constructor through source menu. Then we will debug and see how our sample works now with this super keyword and a constructor in place. So if you see, we removed the constructor here in CBMW and we pasted it here in the notepad. So what we will do, we will ask to generate a constructor using the other option. What we can do in the outline menu, I'm doing it once again. In the outline menu at CBMW, you can bring up the context menu. Then you can go for source option, then generate constructor from a superclass. We can use this option. We can also access this from CBMW. I think we can try once. Okay. It is available in both the places. You can use either outline or the package explorer. So once I click that menu option, it brings up select the constructor to implement. So in this video series, we already learned that a class can have multiple constructors. We called that as a constructor overloading. Here we have only one version of constructor. So if you have 4 or 5 versions of overloader constructor, then we can opt for any specific constructor here and you can implement that. So I'm accepting the default for all other things. I hope at present you know the access specifier. So we already explored this in terms of inheritance as well as packages. Now I think you will be familiar with what is private and protected and public. So here they named it as a package. It is actually the default access specifier. So here I'm choosing to place this after BMW port number 2, after this line. That's all. I'm clicking OK, and if you see, it placed a similar constructor. So if I save, it will rectify the error whatever you are seeing. This error is from main entry that we will resolve later. If you see here, I used the default constructor which is no longer available. The user cannot construct the object using the implicit constructor, but because the implicit constructor is replaced by our explicit constructor. Here is one for derived class, here is the one for base class. Right. So since I already copied this, I'm just replacing it here. Now we will explore this by debugging the application. Before that, we will pass the member. What you can do here, I am pressing Control Shift Spacebar to bring up the order in which we should pass the parameter. So it is expecting the name, then speed, part number 1, part number 2. So name I am giving as BMW Coupe. Then once again I am pressing Control Shift Spacebar. The second one is speed, and just giving 350 km/h. Then part number 1 is 15 and part number 2 is 2000. That's all. So we now successfully constructed our derived class, and we will explore how it walks through our constructors by debugging it. First it will go to class loader. We can skip that. Step into, and so I'm skipping this class loader with a step at a time. Then if you step in, you can see that it goes to our derived class constructor. So it's a best practice to place the super keyword in the very first line. Java recommends that. So if you create your constructor through Eclipse helper method, then it will automatically place the super keyword. But if you manually type your code, then you have to remember that you should place the super keyword as the first line of the code in the constructor. So here we are calling the base constructor. If we step in, we initialize the base class member. If you see, now we initialized the car to BMW Coupe and max speed is initialized. Then we are initializing the internal member. At this stage, you can see this represents the current object and it is initialized properly. So when we get out of this constructor, we know that object is initialized properly. So you can see all the members here. And now we can call the print BMW car, step into it. And print BMW car in turn will have one more method called print car. Here also we can use the super keyword. What we can do, we can use a super.print car. We will do that once we complete this run. So I'm stepping in, and if you see, it prints name, then maximum speed, after that part number 1 and part number 2. Right? Okay. So now let me switch the workspace and go to our class loader. Is not required. Let us remove it. In CMBMW, I can place super. Let me put a breakpoint. It's a period, and you can see the method or what are all the member. You can access it with the super keyword. Maximum, max speed, and car name are shown here. And what we need is a print method, print car. That's all. You can use like this also. So the members are public here. So if we make it private, the super keyword is really required to initialize these members. Or because one may ask a question that here, instead of using super, I can directly access that member and initialize. Yes, of course, since it is a derived class and the access specifier is public, you can directly initialize those members. Super is not required. It is required only when the member become private. Right, okay, now we will explore this. It doesn't throw any error. Now we will explore this part. If you see here, we can use this notation as well. And if we step into it, will go to the print car method. So that's all here. Let us go back to Eclipse. Let us go back to our PowerPoint. So here is the summary of what we saw in this video series. We saw how super keyword was used in Java to refer the base or a superclass. So in our example, we used the superclass, the super keyword to call the base class constructor. We also called a base class method using the super keyword in this demo. Then we also learned what is implicit and explicit constructor. So implicit constructor is the default constructor provided by the compiler. We studied this already when we are learning the constructor in this video series. But here we explored further how it comes into picture in terms of inheritance hierarchy. So once a developer goes and adds a constructor in the base class, then in the derived class, if we don't have any constructor, the compiler will complain about it. But because providing a constructor in base class hides, or instead of hides, the better way is it completely removes the implicit constructor. Then if all the derived class, if they don't have any constructor, then they will start complaining, stating that the constructor is undefined. That means the compiler provided constructor is undefined. So in this video series, we saw that we resolved this error by providing an explicit constructor. Here we provided an explicit constructor with a 2 parameter. That's what Eclipse suggested. But we can rectify this error by providing an explicit 0 argument constructor as well. So since the error states that the 0 argument constructor, which is defined by the constructor in the base class, was removed by the placement of new constructor in the base class, either we can add a constructor as we saw in this demo, or we can even provide a default explicit constructor in the derived class. That means a constructor with no argument, with 0 parameter. But however, we need to supply, or we need to call our base class constructor even in the 0 argument constructor. That means we have to provide some default value for the constructor in the base class. Alright, that's all in this video. Thanks for watching. Bye.